Have you ever been told to apologize while your heart was still screaming that something was wrong? Hold on to that feeling while you read this one. You upset Els because you were jealous of a promise you never even understood, and you're going to apologize tonight. That was what Rhys said to his wife in their small Ontario kitchen after his female best friend ran out into the snow with tears on her face. 2 hours later, inside an old hockey arena, Nat could only stand frozen under a memorial wall when she realized the woman she had resented was tied to the worst night of her husband's life. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where in Canada you're reading from and whether you've ever had a friendship in your marriage that made you uneasy. Type "trust your gut" if you know what it feels like to sense trouble before you can prove it. And for everyone who already liked and subscribed, may God lighten what's weighing on your heart, protect your family, and bless the work of your hands this week. I'm telling you right now, this story still makes my chest feel tight, so listen closely. My name is Nat, short for Natalie, and when all of this happened, I was 32 years old, working as the front desk secretary at a public elementary school in a small town outside Kingston, Ontario. I wasn't glamorous. I wasn't one of those women people turned around to stare at in restaurants. I was the kind of woman who remembered everybody's birthdays, packed extra mittens in winter, and kept granola bars in my purse because somebody always forgot to eat. I came from a quieter life in Belleville, where my dad repaired furnaces for years and my mom worked in a long-term care home until her knees gave out. We weren't poor, but everything in our house had always been measured. Hydro bill, groceries, gas. How much was left before payday? I grew up learning how to make a home feel warm, even when money was tight. Rhys was 34, broad-shouldered, quiet, and the kind of man people in town trusted with practical things. He worked for the municipality, mostly handling roads and snow equipment in winter and maintenance jobs the rest of the year. He had grown up in that town, knew every back road, every family name, every old guy who still wanted to talk junior hockey at the hardware store. People liked him because he rarely raised his voice, never showed off, and always stepped in when someone's truck wouldn't start or a senior needed help getting their bins to the curb after a storm. I married him because, in the beginning, he made me feel safe. Not excited, not dizzy, safe. At 28, after a bad relationship in my early 20s with a man who lied as easily as breathing, safe felt holy to me. Rhys was steady. He called when he said he would. He showed up on time. He fixed the loose stair in my rental without being asked. When we got engaged, my mother cried because she said, "That one looks like he'll stay when life gets ugly." And I had believed that too. We had been married 4 years by the winter this story really began, and from the outside we looked like one of those couples people in small Ontario towns assume will last forever. We lived in a modest detached house with peeling white trim, a driveway that was always one snowfall away from needing shoveling again, and a backyard that looked beautiful for maybe 6 weeks a year, and then spent the rest of the time under frost, slush, or wet leaves. We didn't have kids yet. We had talked about it. Tried, then stopped talking about trying because every month was starting to feel like a test I kept failing in private. And then there was Els. Her full name was Elise, but nobody called her that. She was 33, originally from a town closer to Ottawa, and she had that kind of face people described as gentle even when she wasn't smiling. She worked part-time at the pharmacy counter in the grocery store and spent the rest of her time raising her daughter, Kenzie, who was 7 then and obsessed with skating, sparkly stickers, and grilled cheese sandwiches cut into exact squares. Els had been in Rhys' life long before I came along. I knew that from the start. Everybody did. In a town that size, history clung to people like cold. "She's like family," Rhys had told me the first time I asked. That sentence sounds harmless when you're dating. It feels different when you're married and the woman who is like family still calls after 10 at night. At first, I tried to be mature about it. Really, I did. When Rhys and I were still engaged, Els would show up at community fundraisers and stand with us like she naturally belonged there. At Thanksgiving dinners hosted by Rhys' parents, she already knew where the serving spoons were kept. At the winter charity skate, she handed Rhys tape for the kids' hockey signs before I even knew he was volunteering. When we went to the Christmas parade downtown, she and Kenzie stood beside us for almost the whole thing while people greeted Rhys like they were one strange little unit. It always stopped just short of something I could point at and say, "There, that is wrong." No flirting. No touching that lingered. No whispered conversations with guilty faces. Just this constant presence. Like I had married a man who came with weather I couldn't control. The first year of our marriage, I kept swallowing the discomfort because I didn't want to be that wife. The insecure one. The jealous one. The one people in town would quietly label dramatic. Small towns are kind like that to your face and brutal behind your back. So I smiled. I helped set extra plates when Els came for dinner. I brought birthday gifts for Kenzie and wrote my name under Reese on the card. I even sat through one freezing Saturday at the outdoor rink while retied Kenzie's skates because Els had forgotten gloves and needed to run back to the car. I stood there with numb toes and watched my husband crouched in the snow in front of another woman's child, gently tightening her laces while she chirped, "Thanks, Uncle Ree." Uncle Ree. I remember the way that name hooked into me. That night, while I folded laundry in our bedroom, I said as lightly as I could, "Does Kenzie always call you that?" Ree didn't even look up from his phone. Pretty much. Since when? A while. I folded one of his work shirts too hard. You didn't think that was something I should know? He sighed then, not angry, just tired in that way that immediately made me feel unreasonable. Nat, it's not a secret. She's a little kid. I know she's a little kid. So, why are we making it weird? There it was. The first tiny twist. Not answering me. Just handing the weirdness back like I was the one who had brought it into the room. I told myself marriage was adjustment, that everybody had blind spots, that I needed to get used to the history my husband had before me. Then winter came hard that year, and everything started scraping against my nerves. If you've lived in Ontario through a long winter, you know how life narrows. Darkness too early, boots by the door, salt stains on the mat, dry air in the house, the same heavy coat every day, the roads turning mean after sundown, people staying inside, then suddenly gathering everywhere at once because hockey season, school events, fundraisers, and community dinners become the only way not to lose your mind. That winter, Els was everywhere. At Ree's parents' place one Sunday for roast beef and mashed potatoes, she was already seated when we arrived, Kenzie swinging her feet under the chair. My mother-in-law, who liked me well enough but adored history she had known longer, smiled and said, "Nat, honey, could you grab the cranberry sauce from the fridge?" Els forgot to bring the buns, poor thing. She had such a busy day. I remember standing there with my gloves still on, not even fully inside the house, and hearing that as if I were the one being folded into an existing arrangement. During dinner, Kenzie dropped gravy on her sweater, and Ree immediately got up with a napkin before Els even moved. When I looked at him, he said, "What? It's hot." I forced a laugh. I didn't say anything, but he was already defensive, which meant part of him knew I had reason. Later that night, when we got home, I was unloading leftovers into the fridge while he stacked dishes beside the sink. "Do you not see how that looks?" I asked. He rubbed his forehead. "How what looks?" "The way you jump every time she needs something. The way your family treats her like she's attached to us." He opened the cupboard a little too hard. "Because she's been around for years, Nat. And I'm your wife. You think I forgot that?" I put the lid on the container and turned to him. "Sometimes, honestly, I do." He stared at me for a second, then shook his head. "This is exactly why I don't want to have this conversation. You take one thing and make it 10 things." I wish I could say, I answered calmly. I didn't. I said, "No, Ree. You make 10 things feel like one thing until I start wondering if I'm losing my mind." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for one painful second, I thought I saw guilt. But he just said, "You're reading something dirty into something decent." That sentence sat inside me for days. Something decent. If it was so decent, why did I always feel shut out of it? Around the same time, my own life had become thinner in ways he wasn't noticing. Work at the school was fine, but January always dragged. Kids came in coughing. Parents forgot forms. The office heater made one side of my body hot and the other side cold. I spent my days smiling at people while privately feeling like a stretched elastic band. My friend Mo, short for Morgan, was one of the grade 3 teachers, 31, originally from Toronto, loud in the best possible way, and the kind of woman who could tell from your face alone whether your marriage was annoying you. One afternoon, while we were eating soup in the staff room, she set her spoon down and asked, "Okay, what's going on?" I tried to play dumb. "What do you mean?" "You've had the same angry forehead line for a week." I laughed, but it came out thin. That sounds attractive. I didn't say it was unattractive. I said it was angry. Start talking.
So I did.
Not everything, just enough. I told her about Els always being around, about the phone calls, about Kenzie calling Uncle Ree, about how every time I tried to discuss boundaries, he acted like I was accusing him of something disgusting. Mo listened without interrupting, then said carefully, "Do you think he's cheating?" I stared at my soup. "I don't know." "Do you think she wants him?" "I don't know." "Do you think something is being hidden?" That one I answered immediately. "Yes." Mo leaned back. "Then that's your real problem." I looked up. What? Not the woman. The hiding. That landed harder than I wanted it to, because she was right. If Rhea had sat me down, looked me in the eye, and told me why Els mattered this much, maybe I could have held it differently. Maybe I wouldn't have felt like I was always walking into rooms where the real story had started years before I arrived. Instead, there were fragments. Late night calls he took on the porch in winter, breath turning white in the dark. E-transfers I spotted once on our shared account with no explanation except she needed help. An envelope from the arena office addressed to him, which he tucked into a drawer before I could read it. A little pink kid's mitten in the back seat of his truck in March. "Kenzie forgot it," he said quickly when I held it up. "Why was Kenzie in your truck?" "I dropped them home after practice." I remember my stomach going cold. "You didn't tell me that." He shrugged like it was nothing. It was snowing hard. That was Rhee's gift. Making things sound practical. Necessary. Temporary. Small. So that every discomfort of mine looked selfish beside it. The worst part was that Els herself never acted like a woman having an affair. She acted like someone exhausted. Someone stretched thin. She didn't flirt with Rhea in front of me. She didn't dress for attention. Most of the time, she looked one missed sleep away from tears. Her coat was always zipped wrong in a rush. Her hair was always half falling, out of a ponytail. She thanked me too much when I did anything for Kenzie. That made it harder somehow, not easier. A villain would have been simpler. But pain can still invade your marriage even when it enters politely. By February, the problem wasn't just Els anymore. It was me becoming someone I didn't like. I started clocking how long Rhee's calls with her lasted. I noticed when his face changed after hanging up. I listened for her name in conversations with his parents. I hated myself for checking the bank app one night after he'd fallen asleep beside me. There were 3 transfers that month. Nothing huge. $70. 120. 45. I sat there in bed with the blue light on my face, reading those numbers as if they were proof of betrayal. Then I felt guilty immediately. Then angry for feeling guilty. Then ashamed that I couldn't even tell which part of me to trust anymore. A week later, I found the note. It was by accident, and for a long time I told myself it wasn't snooping because I had only been looking for stamps. Rhea kept old bills, manuals, and random paperwork in the junk drawer by the kitchen desk. I was searching under takeout menus and batteries when I found a folded paper tucked inside an envelope from the Millbrook Memorial Arena. I should have put it back. I know that. But something in me was too worn down to be noble anymore. I opened it. It wasn't a love note. It was worse in a way because I didn't understand it. A typed page. A list of fees. Youth hockey sponsorship, ice time assistance, equipment subsidy. At the bottom, in handwriting, a small note. Received with thanks.
Cam.
Kenzie McKenzie. I assumed then, though I didn't know her last name well enough to be certain. There was no explanation for why my husband was paying toward a child's hockey expenses without talking to me first. I was still holding that paper when Rhea walked in from the garage. He stopped the second he saw my face. "What are you doing?" he asked. I held up the page. "You tell me." His expression shut down so fast it scared me. "Why were you in that drawer?" I gave a disbelieving laugh. "Seriously? That's your first question?" He took off his gloves slowly. like he was forcing himself to stay calm. Nat.
No.
Don't nat me. What is this? He glanced at the paper and reached for it, but I stepped back. Is this for Kenzie? I asked. He was quiet. That was answer enough. You're paying for her hockey? He looked at the floor once, then back at me. It's not what you think. That sentence almost made me scream. Do you know, I said, how tired I am of hearing that? He lowered his voice. I can explain. Then explain. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it again. That hurt more than anything. I felt tears rise. So fast, I got angry at my own body for betraying me in front of him. You always say that, I whispered. You always say you can explain and then you don't. You let me stand here feeling crazy, jealous, small, and then you act like I'm the problem. It's complicated. Why is it complicated? Because it's not only about me. I stared at him. Then who is it about? He looked away again. And in that moment, some terrible thought slid into place. Her. It had to be her. Who else was so important that my husband would rather let me cry in my own kitchen than speak plainly? I put the paper down on the desk with shaking hands. I'm your wife. I know. Then stop protecting everyone else from discomfort before me. His jaw tightened. That's not what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. He ran a hand over his face and said the thing that made me stop trusting my own restraint. You're building something ugly out of something you don't understand. I laughed once, broken and sharp. Then maybe stop keeping me in the dark. He said nothing. And silence in marriage can sound a lot like choice. That night we slept back to back, and I didn't think I slept at all. The next morning, he left before sunrise for plow duty because freezing rain had started overnight. I lay there listening to the scrape of branches outside the window and felt hollowed out. On my drive to work, every road looked gray and mean. Dirty snowbanks, slush sprayed by transport trucks, little houses with porch lights still on in the dawn. Everybody in town was just trying to get through winter. That should have made me feel less alone. It didn't. At lunch, Mo took one look at me and said, "Bad? Worse." I told her about the arena paper. Her eyes widened. He's paying for the kids' hockey? Yes. Without telling you? Yes. And still no explanation? I shook my head. She sat back. Okay, that's bad. For some reason, hearing someone else say it made my throat close. I looked down and muttered, he keeps making me feel like the worst version of myself. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, what do you want exactly? I thought about it. Not a fight. Not even proof of cheating, though at that point part of me almost preferred something simple and ugly I could point to. What I wanted was for my husband to stop treating me like an outsider in my own marriage. I want the truth, I said finally. Mo nodded slowly, then stopped asking halfway questions. That advice stayed with me. And maybe if I had waited another week, another month, maybe if Ree had finally found the courage to speak, the explosion that came later would have happened differently. But hurt has its own weather. 3 nights after I found the paper, Ree's parents hosted a family dinner because his dad's brother was in town from Oshawa. It was the kind of thing that sounded casual and turned into 12 people, too many coats on the bed upstairs, and the smell of roast chicken and onions trapped in the curtains. I almost didn't go, but in a town that small, not showing up would have started its own story, and I was too tired to become one. So I went. The house was loud when we got there. Boots by the door. Hockey commentary on the TV in the den. Someone's toddler whining. My mother-in-law bustling between kitchen and dining room. Ree's uncle already opening his second beer. And there, carrying a foiled tray and helping Kenzie out of her tiny winter boots, was Els. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Hi, Nat. I heard myself answer. Hi. Nothing in her face suggested guilt. That almost made me angrier. During dinner, the usual things happened. Ree passed Kenzie the carrots because she didn't like reaching over the gravy. Els and my mother-in-law compared notes about school registrations. Ree's father asked Kenzie about skating lessons, and before Els could answer, Ree said, she landed that step turn last week. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. How did he know that? Because he had been there.
Of course he had.
I looked around the table, and felt suddenly like the room had tilted. Everyone else seemed comfortable inside a story I had never been fully told. Even if there was nothing physical, nothing romantic, there was intimacy there. Shared knowledge, shared concern, shared routine, and all of it had been presented to me in small pieces, as if I should simply absorb it and be gracious. Ree noticed my face and gave me a warning look. That was another thing I hated. That look. The one that said, "Don't do this here." As if the only inappropriate thing in the room would be my reaction. After dinner, while people drifted into the living room, Els was in the kitchen rinsing a serving spoon. I was scraping plates into the compost bin when she said softly, "Kenzie really likes the scarf you gave her." I didn't answer right away. "Thanks," she added, almost uncertainly. I turned and looked at her. She looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes. Her hands were red from cold and dishwater. Any Kinder woman would have let that be enough. But I had gone past kind. "I think," I said carefully, "that maybe Kenzie is getting attached in ways that aren't healthy." Els blinked. "What?" My pulse was pounding. Calling Ree Uncle Ree, depending on him for so much. The calls, the money, the constant involvement. The color drained from her face. "Nat," she said quietly, "I didn't know you felt like that." "That's the problem," I replied. "Nobody seems to care what I feel." She set the spoon down. "I never wanted to make you uncomfortable, but you did." She swallowed. "Ree has always helped us."
Us.
That word hit me like a slap. I gave a bitter little laugh. Exactly. Her eyes filled so fast I almost stopped. Almost. But all the weeks of humiliation, confusion, and being treated like the unstable one came rushing up at once. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't sorry yet, "but sometimes it feels like you lean on my husband like he's still yours to call whenever your life gets hard." Her mouth parted. She looked like I had physically hit her. "Nat," she whispered, "that's not fair."
I should have stepped back then.
I should have. Instead, I said the ugliest honest thing inside me. Maybe not. But neither is being expected to smile while another woman takes up this much room in my marriage. The kitchen went silent. Not quiet.
Silent.
Because Ree had walked in. He didn't say anything at first. He looked at me, then at Els, whose tears were already spilling down her face. She put both hands over her mouth like she was trying not to make a sound. Kenzie's little voice carried faintly from the living room asking Ree's mother for juice, and that normal innocent sound beside Els breaking apart made the whole moment feel awful. Els grabbed her coat from the chair. "I should go," she said. "Els, wait," Ree said immediately. She shook her head hard.
No.
"I can't." She left so fast she forgot the foil tray she had brought. The front door opened. Winter air rushed in, then slammed shut.
Ree turned to me.
I had never seen his face look like that. Not rage exactly.
Worse.
Shock, hurt, fury, and something close to disgust. "What did you say to her?" he asked. I heard the danger in his voice and lifted my chin anyway. I said what should have been said a long time ago. His mother appeared in the doorway behind him, eyes wide. "What's going on?" Ree didn't even look back. "Can you take Kenzie for a minute if she comes in?" My stomach dropped. Kenzie was still here?
No.
Of course. Els had come in their car. That made everything uglier. His mother, sensing disaster, nodded and disappeared. Ree stepped closer to me. "Tell me exactly what you said." I was shaking now, but I wouldn't back down in front of him. Not after months of swallowing. "I said she depends on you too much. I said this has gone too far. You made her cry and leave in the middle of dinner. She is not the victim here." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "There it is again," I shot back. "That line. That exact line. You say that every time because you don't want to tell me the truth." His voice dropped lower. "Nat, you crossed a line tonight." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, did I? Or did I finally say out loud what everybody keeps expecting me to quietly tolerate?" His hands clenched once at his sides, then unclenched. "You need to apologize to her." I felt heat rush up my neck. "In front of your whole family," I said, You're ordering me to apologize to the woman who has been wedged between us for years? She has not been wedged between us. Then what do you call it?
His eyes flashed.
I call it loyalty. The room seemed to narrow. Loyalty. Not marriage. Not honesty. Loyalty. To her? I whispered. He looked at me with a kind of pained anger I didn't know how to read. To something bigger than your jealousy. That sentence humiliated me so completely, I thought I might either slap him or collapse. Instead, I just stood there, cold all over, while somewhere in the living room people turned the TV volume up a little too loudly to pretend they weren't listening. I looked at him and said, "You're really doing this?" He held my gaze.
Yes.
I am. You are apologizing to her tonight. Every married woman who has ever felt dismissed will understand what I mean when I say there are moments your body remembers before your mind does. My scalp went tight. My ribs hurt. My mouth tasted metallic. I wanted to scream that he was choosing her. I wanted to tell his whole family. They were all part of this. I wanted to walk out into the snow and never come back. Instead, I said, with terrible calm, "Fine." He blinked once, maybe surprised I had agreed so quickly. "Fine," I repeated. "Take me to her." Something moved across his face then. Not relief, not victory, just strain. "Get your coat," he said. So I did. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. On the drive, the roads were dark and edged with dirty snowbanks. The sky had that heavy low winter look like more weather was coming. Ree drove with both hands tight on the wheel. I sat beside him in silence, so rigid it almost felt like leaving my body. I assumed we were going to Elle's house. Or maybe the late cafe by the highway where people from town sometimes went when they wanted privacy and weak coffee. Instead, Ree turned away from the residential streets. I frowned. "Where are we going?" He didn't answer. My heart began to pound again. "Ree." He kept driving. We passed the grocery store, the pharmacy, the dark church parking lot, the curling club with only one side lit, and then he turned onto the road that led toward the old arena on the edge of town. I stared out the windshield. Why are we here? He parked but didn't get out immediately. The arena lights were on. Through the glass, I could see movement inside, little blurred figures crossing the ice. Kids practice. My confusion sharpened into anger again. If this is some kind of public humiliation thing. It's not. Then what is it? He closed his eyes briefly, like he was bracing himself against pain. "You said you wanted the truth." I swallowed. "Yes." "Then come inside." He got out before I could answer. For one wild second, I considered staying in the truck, letting him go, calling a taxi, going anywhere else. But I had spent too many months standing in half answers. So I followed him. The cold bit my face the second I stepped out. Gravel crunched under my boots. Somewhere nearby, a snowblower was running. The arena smelled exactly the way every small-town Canadian arena smells the second you step through the doors. Damp air, old rubber mats, bleach, stale coffee, and ice. Kids in helmets rushed past us toward the dressing rooms while parents in puffy coats stood with travel mugs and tired faces. Ree said nothing as he led me down the corridor past the snack counter and toward the older part of the building where framed photos and plaques covered the wall. I slowed. He kept walking until he stopped in front of the memorial display. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. An enlarged photo of a smiling man in a hockey jacket. A plaque beneath it. Fresh white flowers in a metal holder. Several smaller pictures around the frame. A younger Ree, that same man, a much younger Els, a baby I assumed was Kenzie, and one winter photo of all three adults standing in snow up to their calves, laughing into the wind. My whole body went cold. The smiling man in the center had Ree's arm thrown around his shoulder. And beneath the photo, in clean engraved letters, was the name Jack. Ree stood beside me, so still he looked carved out of the same frozen air. I heard my own voice come out then. "Who is Jack?" Ree did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough enough that I barely recognized it. He was my best friend. I looked again at the memorial wall, then at the smaller photos, then back at the woman in one of them. Els. Not with Ree, with Jack. My mouth went dry. The The sounds of children skating and coaches shouting drifted out from the rink beyond the doors, but everything around me felt far away, muffled, unreal. Then I saw another photo, one of Jack kneeling beside a tiny little girl on skates. Kenzie. My knees nearly gave out. I turned to Ree, and for the first time in all the years I had known him, I saw the full shape of grief on his face before I understood a single word. Before we go back in, tell me this in the comments. Have you ever judged a situation too early and then felt your whole heart drop when you learned the truth? Type, I've been there if you know that kind of regret. And honestly, this next part humbled me so badly that even now, I still think about how little we really know when people hide their pain behind normal routines. I couldn't stop staring at the photos. Jack had one of those open, solid faces that made people seem trustworthy even in a still picture. In one frame, he was standing with Ree in front of the arena entrance, both of them younger, both holding coffees, their shoulders dusted with snow like they had been laughing outside. In another, Els was beside him with one hand tucked through his arm, looking tired but happy in the way young parents look when life is busy and money is probably tight, but love still makes everything feel possible. Then there was Kenzie, tiny in a pink toque, grinning up at him from the ice. My stomach turned so hard I had to put a hand on the wall. Ree stood next to me, breathing slowly through his nose like every inhale hurt. Jack and I grew up together, he said at last. Same street, same school, same teams. We played here when we were kids. We worked our first summer jobs together. He was the one who showed me how to drive in snow without panicking. I swallowed. And Els? He kept his eyes on the memorial wall. He met her in college. She moved here after they got married. Kenzie was barely a year old when he died. The last word hung in the air between us. Something in my chest started sinking, deeper and deeper, like every wrong assumption I had made was dragging me down with it. I looked at the plaque again. There was a date engraved there. A January date, 5 years before Ree and I met. Car accident? I asked quietly. Ree nodded once. Outside the rink doors, a whistle blew. Little skates scraped across ice. Someone shouted, "Good hustle, boys." Life was still going on around us, ordinary and loud, and I suddenly hated that I had walked into it carrying jealousy, while other people had apparently been carrying grief. Still, I needed him to say it. I turned to him. Then why didn't you tell me? That was the first time he looked directly at me. And what I saw on his face wasn't anger anymore. It was exhaustion.
Shame.
The kind of pain that had been packed down so tightly for so long and no longer came out as tears. It came out as silence, temper, and control. Because I should have, he said, a long time ago. I stared at him, waiting. His voice dropped. The night Jack died, we were driving back from Kingston. Snowstorm came in faster than forecast. Whiteout. I was behind the wheel first, then he took over because I was tired and the road was getting bad. A transport drifted. Jack swerved to keep us from taking the full hit. My throat tightened. Ree kept going, but his eyes had unfocused slightly, like he wasn't seeing the arena anymore.
He got me out, he said.
That part is the one I still dream about. Me shouting his name, him pushing at my shoulder, telling me to move, telling me to get up. Another car came through before I could get him clear. I covered my mouth. For a second, I thought he might stop speaking again. Instead, he said, very quietly, "At the hospital, before everything shut down, he told me to look after them. He said, don't let them drown because of me." I told him I wouldn't. I felt tears burn my eyes instantly. That promise, those late-night calls, the money, the skates, the arena fees, Kenzie calling him Uncle Ree, all of it rearranged itself at once. Not romance, not betrayal. A debt of love and grief and guilt so heavy it had bent itself into my marriage without ever being named. I whispered, "Oh my God." Ree laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Yeah. I looked back at the memorial display and then at him. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? He leaned against the wall like his legs were giving out on him. Because every time I tried to talk about that night, I felt like I was back in the snow. Because the town already knew enough to let it become gossip. Because Els hates having her life explained like she's some tragedy people can pass around over coffee. Because I told myself I was protecting everybody. His jaw tightened. And because once too much time had passed, I didn't know how to admit I'd kept it from you. That answer hurt because it was honest. Not good enough, but honest. I asked, "Do your parents know?" He nodded. "MO, no, sorry." I stopped myself, still disoriented. People in town? Some older people know parts. A lot of them don't know details. Some know Jack died in a storm. Some know I stayed close to Els and Kenzie. Not many know why I helped the way I do. I thought of every family dinner, every quiet glance, every time his mother had spoken to Els like she belonged inside our household story while I stood there confused. A new anger flared under the shame. They all let me look crazy. Ree closed his eyes briefly. "I know. No," I said, and my voice shook. "You do not get to say that like it's small." I stood in my own marriage feeling stupid and jealous and cruel because you let me live beside a secret big enough to explain everything. He didn't defend himself. That made me cry harder. I hated that I had said those things to Els. I hated that Ree had hidden the truth. I hated that two things could be true at once and still leave everybody bleeding. He stepped toward me then, very carefully, like I might recoil. "I was wrong," he said. "For all of it. For not telling you. For making you feel like your instincts were dirty instead of admitting I was the one creating the confusion. And for pushing you to apologize before I gave you the truth." I laughed through tears. "You think?" A tiny, broken smile crossed his face, then disappeared. I wiped under my eyes with my glove. "Where is she?" "In the viewing room upstairs with Kenzie. Practice is almost over." That made panic shoot through me. "She's here? Right now." He nodded. I looked at the floor. My cheeks burned so hot I wanted the ice from the rink just to stand inside it. "I can't go up there like this." "Yes, you can." "No, Ree. I accused a widow of emotionally clinging to my husband when her husband died saving you." His face twisted. "I know." I let out a breath that felt like it tore on the way out. "I need a minute." He nodded and stepped back. So I stood alone in front of Jack's photo and tried to pull myself together. The memorial wall was lined with framed names of people who had coached, played, volunteered, donated, kept the rink alive across generations of cold seasons and small-town budgets. It hit me then that this arena wasn't random. This was the place where the old version of all of them still lived. The place Jack had belonged. The place Kenzie was now trying to belong to. All the tiny pieces I'd resented were part of something bigger than me. That realization did not make my shame lighter. It made it heavier. When I finally turned around, Ree was waiting a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, watching me like he wasn't sure he deserved to come any closer. I said, "Take me to her." We climbed the stairs to the small upstairs viewing room where parents stood behind the glass looking down on the ice. The heater made everything smell faintly dusty. Kids in blue and red jerseys chased pucks below, while adults murmured over coffee cups. Els was in the far corner on a metal chair, Kenzie leaning against her side with a coloring book on her lap. When Els looked up and saw me, she visibly stiffened. I had never wanted to disappear more. Ree stopped by the door and let me walk the rest of the way alone. Els rose immediately, one hand still on Kenzie's shoulder. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "Nat," she said quietly, guarded now. I looked at little Kenzie first. "Hi, sweetheart." She gave me a shy, confused look and went back to her crayons. Then I looked at Els. There are apologies you give because someone demands them. And there are apologies that strip your pride right out of you because you finally understand the harm you did. Mine was the second kind. "I am so sorry," I said, and my voice cracked on the first word. Not because I was told to say it, because I was wrong, and because I spoke to you cruelly without understanding anything you've been carrying. Els said nothing. Tears spilled again, hot and humiliating. I thought. I stopped and shook my head. It doesn't matter what I thought. I should have asked differently. I should have demanded honesty from my husband without putting that pain on you. I am deeply sorry. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she looked past me at Ree standing near the door. Something flashed across her face then. Hurt, yes, but also tired resignation. Like none of this surprised her as much as it should have. Did you tell her? She asked him. Ree answered softly. Everything. Els closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them again, she looked older than she had earlier that evening. I never wanted to come between your marriage, she said to me. I know that now. I told him more than once that he needed to talk to you. I told him secrets like this rot things. My head jerked slightly toward Ree. He didn't deny it. That gave my shame a second edge. I had been angry at her while she had apparently been the one insisting on honesty all along. Els pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. I hated those late calls too, Nat. Every time I needed help, every time Kenzie got sick, every time a bill knocked me flat, I knew your husband was carrying something from that night that never really left him. But sometimes when your life falls apart and the town moves on, you stop knowing who you're allowed to call. Her voice broke on the last sentence. I felt my throat close again. Kenzie looked up from the coloring book. Mommy, Els touched her hair gently. It's okay, Bug. I crouched a little so I'd be less towering, less threatening. I'm sorry for hurting your mom. I said to Kenzie too, because children always know more than adults think they do. She studied me, solemn and small. Mom cried in the car. I know, I whispered. And that was my fault. There was no clean ending to that moment. No movie-style embrace. No instant healing. But Els nodded once. Very faintly. Thank you for saying it properly, she said. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. But it was mercy. Ree drove us home in silence after practice ended. Not cold silence this time. Broken open silence. The kind that follows when something hidden for years finally gets dragged into light, and everyone is too raw to shape it yet. At home, I took off my boots and stood in the kitchen while the furnace clicked on and the house gave its usual little winter noises. Ree remained near the door. I'll sleep downstairs if you want, he said. I turned toward him slowly. Don't make this into one more thing I have to manage for you tonight. He flinched. Sit down, I said. We sat at the kitchen table like two strangers who had somehow ended up with the same keys. I asked him everything then, not in one dramatic burst. In waves. Did he love Els?
No, not that way. Never that way.
Had there ever been anything physical between them?
No.
Had he hidden money beyond what I knew?
No.
He showed me the account records, the separate memorial fund donations, the help with hockey fees, winter boots, grocery runs after Kenzie had pneumonia, the occasional hydro bill. Small things over years, but enough that I should have been told. Why hadn't he trusted me? That question made him go quiet for a long time. Then he admitted something that, for all the pain of the night, was one of the most truthful things I had ever heard from him. Because if I said it out loud, he told me, staring at the wood grain of the table, then I had to admit I wasn't helping out of pure goodness anymore. Part of me was helping because I still felt like I should have died too. I didn't speak. He pressed his thumb into the edge of the table until the knuckle went white. Sometimes when Els called, I wasn't just hearing her. I was hearing the last thing Jack asked me to do. And every time I showed up, I could pretend I was still fixing something from that night. There it was. Not romance. Survivor's guilt.
Trauma.
A promise turned into penance. I sat back in my chair and cried quietly for a while. Not because that explanation erased what he had done to our marriage, but because it revealed how much damage unspoken pain could do when it was left to govern a household. After a long time, I said, "You didn't protect me." He nodded once, eyes red. "I know. You protected the secret." Another nod. "And in doing that, you made me become the ugliest version of myself." This time he whispered, "I know." We both needed help. That became clear before dawn. The next day, I called in sick to work. Mo phoned me before 9 because apparently my voice in a text saying, "Long story, bad night." Alive, though, had not reassured her. When I finally told her the truth, she went completely silent. Then she said, "Well, that is not what I expected." "Me neither." A softer pause. "How are you?" I looked out at our street buried under old snowbanks and said the only honest thing. Ashamed, angry, sad for all of them. Still angry at Ree. Also embarrassed that I made myself into a villain in someone else's grief. Mo exhaled. Okay, first, you are not a villain. You are reacting to a secret your husband let shape your marriage without context. Second, yes, you owe Elle's real repair. Third, Ree needs professional help, not just apology and a sad face. That was why I loved Mo. She could drag compassion and common sense into the same room. By that afternoon, I had also spoken to Sarah. Everyone called her Sarah, though on paper she was probably Sarah Mackenzie, a 38-year-old trauma therapist in Kingston that our school social worker recommended for couples navigating grief spillover, infertility strain, and trust issues. Canada has a way of making help sound practical when you need it. Intake forms, wait lists, coverage questions, snow tires, and emotional collapse. All part of adult life. We got lucky. A cancellation opened up the following week. Ree agreed immediately. That mattered to me more than flowers would have. The first counseling session was brutal. Sarah's office was warm, beige, and lined with books that made me irrationally nervous, like they might know exactly how badly we had handled things. She had kind eyes, a low voice, and the unnerving ability to wait through silence until the truth got tired of hiding. She was from Ottawa originally, had worked for years with first responders and accident survivors before moving west of the city for a slower life, and she saw through Ree in maybe 12 minutes. When he described helping Els as just something I do, Sarah asked, if it's just something you do, why are you physically bracing while you say it? He didn't answer. When I described how I had come to resent a grieving widow because my husband kept saying I didn't understand, Sarah asked him, why was your wife expected to carry the emotional cost of a secret she never consented to? He cried then. Not dramatically, not loudly, just one hand over his eyes, shoulders shaking once, like his body had finally lost the strength to keep winter locked inside it. I cried too. It was one of the ugliest, most useful hours of my life. Over the next month, more truths surfaced. Ree had panic episodes every year near the anniversary of Jack's death, but instead of talking about them, he threw himself into work and helping Els with anything that came up. His mother knew more than she should have and had been quietly smoothing everything over for years, assuming that if I was a decent wife, I would simply accept that some things were complicated. Els had repeatedly told him he needed boundaries and honesty if he was going to stay in Kenzie's life without damaging his marriage. And Kenzie, sweet little Kenzie, had never called him Uncle Ree to stake some emotional claim. She called him that because after Jack died, she had grown up hearing adults around her say, Ree will help. Ask Ree. Uncle Ree can come. Until the title simply settled there. The more I learned, the more my shame remained real, but changed shape. I had been wrong about Els, but I had not been wrong that something in my marriage was deeply off. Once I understood that, I could finally stop splitting myself in two between guilt and self-protection. A week later, I asked Els if she would meet me for coffee in Kingston. Neutral ground. No family kitchens. No arena walls. No pressure. She agreed. She looked exhausted when she walked in, but less guarded than before. Winter was starting to ease by then. The sidewalks were still edged with gray snow, but the sun had a little more strength to it. We both ordered tea instead of coffee, which somehow felt appropriate for two women too emotionally tired to handle extra caffeine. I apologized again properly. Not quickly.
Not to get it over with.
Then I told her she did not owe me forgiveness, but I wanted to understand what support from Ree had looked like from her side. She stared down at her mug for a while before speaking. After Jack died, she said, people were wonderful for about 3 months. Casseroles, gift cards, sad eyes, promises to call. Then life moved on for them. I felt my chest tighten. For me, she continued, life didn't move on. There was rent, a baby,
Grief.
the truck insurance mess, snow shoveling, fevers at 2 a.m, Kenzie asking when Daddy was coming back. And every time I called someone twice, I could feel myself becoming a burden. She looked up at me then. Ree never made me feel like that. Tears stung my eyes. But, she added, that didn't mean he was doing it right. He was helping from a wound, Nat, not from balance. That sentence stayed with me. Helping from a wound. I nodded slowly. I see that now. Els gave a tired little smile. I figured you might. We talked for nearly 2 hours. About Kenzie's skating. About what widowhood looks like in a small Canadian town where everybody is kind until your pain lasts too long. About infertility too, surprisingly, because she had guessed from little things I said, and the way I reacted to family comments that Ree and I had been carrying that strain quietly. I learned that Els was stronger than I had ever given her credit for, and lonelier than I had ever imagined. When we left, nothing magical had happened. We were not suddenly best friends, but we were no longer standing on opposite sides of a lie. That spring, life began changing in smaller, steadier ways.
Ree stayed in therapy. So did I.
Then we began going together. He started telling me before he helped Els with something, not asking permission like I was his boss, but involving me because I was his wife. That difference mattered. We set actual boundaries. No late-night calls unless it was urgent. No unexplained money. No private arrangements that I was expected to discover by accident. If Kenzie needed a ride from the arena and Els was stuck at the pharmacy, I knew about it first. If Ree was having a hard week before the anniversary, he said so instead of becoming defensive and distant. And slowly, painfully, my marriage started feeling inhabited again. Not restored to what it had been. Something better than that, eventually. Something honest. My mother-in-law, though, created one last ugly moment before peace had fully earned its place. In early May, the arena hosted its annual community fundraiser for youth hockey. Silent auction. Chili in styrofoam bowls. Local businesses sponsoring teams. Kids running around in half-zipped jackets with flushed faces. The whole town seemed to be there. Ree and I had agreed to attend together, partly because Kenzie was skating in one of the exhibition groups and partly because we were done hiding from discomfort. I thought I was ready. Then, near the baked table, Ree's mother pulled me aside. She lowered her voice and said, "Please be extra warm with Els tonight. People still remember that scene at dinner, and I'd hate for anyone to think you're struggling with jealousy again now that things are settled." I went cold from scalp to spine. There it was. That tone. That smoothing over, woman-to-woman pressure to carry blame gracefully so everybody else could stay comfortable. I looked at her and, for the first time in our entire relationship, did not soften myself. "Things aren't settled because people like you kept expecting silence instead of honesty," I said. Her eyes widened. "Natalie."
No.
"I'm done being managed." She glanced around, embarrassed. "This isn't the place." I held her gaze. Actually, places become wrong when truth is buried in them. I turned and walked away before she could answer. That should have been enough. But small towns breed echoes. By the time the exhibition skate ended, I could feel it. Those glances, that subtle hum of people who had heard pieces of a story and fitted them together badly. One older woman from church gave me a sympathetic smile that was somehow more insulting than open judgment. Another person asked if everything was okay now with Ryan and that other household. That phrase hit me like a slap. That other household. As if Els and Kenzie were some shameful side arrangement. I found Ree near the boards, helping hand out hot chocolate. I pulled him aside and told him what his mother had said and what I had been hearing. His face hardened in a way I hadn't seen since the night at dinner. Then he did something that changed the shape of our marriage more than any private apology ever could. He said, "Come with me." He walked straight to the microphone stand near center ice, where the volunteer coordinator had been making announcements. It was between events, the crowd buzzing and distracted, parents half listening while pulling hats back onto kids' heads. The coordinator, a kind older man everyone called Clark, handed Ree the mic because in towns like ours, people trust municipal men with steady voices to speak about practical matters. Ree didn't speak practically. He stood at center ice in his boots, looked out over half the town, and said, "Before the next skate starts, I need to clear up something I should have handled a long time ago." The arena quieted in that strange ripple way public places do when everybody senses real emotion before they understand the words. My pulse pounded in my ears. Ree kept talking. Some of you know Jack.
Some of you knew him well.
Some of you only know the plaque on the wall. What a lot of you don't know is that before he died in that storm 5 years ago, he asked me to look after Els and Kenzie. I said yes, and then I carried that promise badly. You could have heard a puck drop. Els, standing near the benches with Kenzie, went completely still. Ree's mother looked like someone had cut the floor out from under her. He went on, voice rough but steady. I helped them because I loved my friend, and because he saved my life. But I kept too much hidden, even from my own wife. That secrecy caused pain it never should have caused. So, if any gossip has been floating around about my wife, about Els, or about the kind of help I've given, I am the one responsible for ending it. My eyes filled instantly. He turned then, right there in front of everybody, and held out a hand toward me. Nat, he said into the mic, I'm sorry for letting silence make you carry a story that wasn't yours to carry. I don't think I breathed. Then he looked toward Els. And Els, I'm sorry for letting your grief become something people could misunderstand because I didn't tell the truth properly. There were tears on Els's face before he even finished. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. For once, the truth had entered the room before gossip could. Ree handed the mic back to Clark and stepped off the mat. He came straight to me, not grand, not performative anymore, just shaking slightly, like public honesty had cost him a lot. I looked at him and knew that whatever else happened after that, he had finally chosen clarity over comfort. That was the real apology I had needed. A few minutes later, while the next group of kids took the ice, Els came over holding Kenzie's hand. Kenzie looked between all of us with the serious expression children get when they can tell adults are doing something important. Els said quietly, You didn't have to do that. Ree gave a tired half-smile. Yeah, I did. She nodded once. Then she turned to me, and, to my surprise, she reached for my hand first. Start over, she asked. I squeezed back. Honestly this time. A tiny smile touched her face. Honestly. Kenzie tugged on my sleeve. Are you still mad at my mommy? My heart nearly broke. I crouched down in front of her.
No, sweetheart.
I was confused before, and I said things I shouldn't have. But I'm not mad at your mommy. She considered that. Then she asked, Can you still bring those cookies with the little chocolate chips? I laughed through tears.
Yes.
I can definitely do that. That was the moment the heaviness cracked. Not vanished. Just cracked enough for light in. The months after that were not perfect, but they were real. Summer came slowly, the way it does in Ontario after a punishing winter. The snowbanks shrank. Mud season made everything ugly before green finally returned. Our backyard looked alive again. People dragged patio chairs out. Kids rode bikes after supper. Windows stayed open later into the evening. Ree and I kept going to counseling. We talked about things we should have talked about years earlier. Trauma, fertility, sadness, masculinity, guilt, boundaries, the pressure of small-town expectations, the lazy Canadian habit of calling emotional avoidance being private. I learned that love can be faithful and still be dishonest. Relearned that helping someone nobly does not excuse shutting out your spouse. And I learned something about myself too. That intuition is not the same as interpretation. I sensed something was wrong.
I was right about that.
But I built the wrong story around the feeling because the real story had been hidden from me. That distinction changed me. Els and I found our own rhythm after that. Not forced closeness. Not fake sisterhood because people love neat endings. Something better. Respect. Sometimes, when her pharmacy shift ran late, I picked up Kenzie from the arena and helped her with homework at our kitchen table until Els arrived. Sometimes Els dropped off soup when Ree was having a hard week around the accident anniversary because now she could see it instead of pretending not to. And sometimes the three of us sat in my backyard while Kenzie chased fireflies and talked about Jack openly, which turned out to be one of the kindest things we could have done for everyone. He stopped being a ghost that controlled the room and became what he should have been all along, a loved person we could name. As for Ree's mother, she never apologized in the dramatic way TV mothers do. But she did soften. One Sunday after church, she caught me by the coffee urn and said, awkwardly, I thought keeping things quiet was protecting the family. I answered, it protected appearances. She looked down, then nodded. For her, that was practically a speech. A year later, on the anniversary of Jack's death, the arena held a proper memorial scholarship drive for youth hockey equipment in his name. This time, the fundraiser poster listed all of us among the volunteers.
Els. Me.
Even Kenzie, who insisted she was important enough to help too because she was now 8 and very serious about both skating and clipboards. Standing there beside the donation table, watching Kenzie beam as she helped collect receipts, I felt something I never thought I would feel at the end of the story.
Peace.
Not because the past had become pretty, not because pain had disappeared, but because the truth was finally in the right places. And my marriage, strangely enough, had become stronger not after romance or grand gestures, but after the ugliest possible misunderstanding forced us to become brave enough to say what should have been said years earlier. At home that night, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet, Reese stood beside me at the sink and wrapped one arm around my waist.
Thank you, he said.
I leaned back against him. For what? For staying long enough to hear the truth, even after I made that hard. I looked out the dark kitchen window at the porch light reflecting off the yard and said, "Don't waste that grace." He tightened his arm slightly. "I won't." And for the first time in a very long time, I believed him. From everything I went through, I learned that silence can wound a marriage just as deeply as betrayal when it keeps the truth locked away too long. I also learned that being wrong about someone does not erase the fact that secrecy helped create that mistake in the first place. If you are carrying pain, guilt, or old promises into your marriage, speak before the silence teaches your spouse to fear the wrong thing. Before you go, tell me honestly in the comments, if you were my place, would you have suspected the same thing? Or would you have handled it differently? Type "talk sooner" if this story reminded you that honesty has to come before loyalty starts hurting the people at home. And I have to say this from my heart. Some of the deepest damage in relationships doesn't come from hate, but from pain people think they can carry alone. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs that reminder, like the video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.